Hey son, I was thinking maybe you want to try out some old video games from when I was a kid. Check it out. I got this retro handheld and I put on a bunch of games that I thought you'd get a kick out of. Would you maybe want to get some pizza and play some of these games? You know, to see if you like any of them, and I could watch you play and like root you on and give you tips and tell you how proud of you I am. What do you say, son? Oh right, I forgot to get married and have a family. Dang. Hey there, how's it going? I'm TechDweeb, welcome. Thanks for clicking on the video today. A while back, by which I mean like a week and a half ago, I made a video about how to get kids into retro games. That was a good video, if I do say so myself, which I do. In that video, I covered a whole bunch of stuff about kids, retro games, getting kids into retro games, how to play retro games with kids, and how to kid your retro games and retro your kid games with your retro kids. Or something like that. I obviously can't remember what the video is actually about. However, I do know that in that video I talked about curating a list of games for the kiddo in your life that you're trying to get into retro games. And there were some guiding principles that I suggested. You want to choose the most important retro systems, nothing too weird or obscure. You want to choose a good variety of games, so you want a mix of historically significant games and games with characters they'll know, a few games that are multiplayer focused so you can play games with the kiddo, and fill out the rest with the funnest games you can think of. And most importantly, you don't want to give the kiddo 1,000 games. Too many games in that list and they'll nope out after they play a few duds. So my suggestion was to only put 5 games for each system. 10 of the most popular systems with only 5 games each, for a total of 50 games. I was kind of walking you through making that list for yourself, but I also made my list, which I put in the comments, and I said I would make a video about my list if people wanted me to, and people did want me to. And now I'm here making this video, and then after this I don't know what happens because it's the future. But I can make a prediction, and it's probably going to involve the leftover lasagna that I have in the fridge. Starting with the Atari 2600, and I actually got some pushback for putting this in my list, but I think this makes good sense to include it. The 2600 was an important milestone in gaming. Also, the games are fun, at least if you pick the right ones. And I think the kids would either be interested to see some super early old games to appreciate how far we've come, or at the very least get a good chuckle at how primitive they are. For this, I wanted a couple truly classic games, so I picked Space Invaders and Pac-Man. And while the arcade versions are obviously the better versions, I wanted my arcade section to have more modern stuff, so I think relegating these dusty old dinosaur games to the 2600 game list makes more sense. Atari Pac-Man and Atari Space Invaders were both the top sellers on the 2600, and they both hold up just fine. I put on boxing because this game is a frickin' hoot if you have someone to play with multiplayer. Letting your kiddo punch you in the face is guaranteed to be their fondest childhood memory. And then I have River Raid, which is a great game and super fun. And also, tell your kid that this was the first game made by a girl. I bet that will give them a fresh perspective on why this one's important. And finally, Berserk, which is just pure dumb fun. Super simple to understand how to play, and killing a bunch of robot dummies is the kind of thing that any kiddo can get behind. Next up is arcade, and this is where you want to give some thought to the preferences of your kiddo. If they're too young, maybe some less violent stuff, more puzzle games and bright colors kind of thing. But if you decide your kiddo is ready for some alien guts, I went with Alien vs Predator. Super tight gameplay and awesome pixel art graphics. And you get to play as a predator or human, and there's even a girl character for the girly alien killer in your life. Beat-them-up action games are great for kids because they're super simple to learn how to play, and on emulation you get to live the infinite quarter life. So they're completely stress-free. Doesn't matter if you suck. Armored Warriors is giant robots beating each other up. What's not to love about that? Puzzle Bobble is great for kiddos because it starts out easy, it requires like 5 seconds of explanation of how to play, and I actually find that kids are kinda abnormally good at this game. Shooting bubbles and matching colors is just something that kids get. I wanted to put on an older game, one of the classics, Galaga, but I put on the more recent Galaga 88. I say recent, but it's still almost 40 years ago. Great way to play Galaga though. Same great game with just a bit of a facelift for the graphics. Finally, I had to go with a fighting game. Kids get right into fighting games. It brings out their bloodlust. If you go with Street Fighter Alpha 3, you'll get an amazing game and get to know the characters from a super important game franchise that is still going strong today. On to the NES. Considering the demographic of my channel, there's a good chance that this was your first video game console that you owned, and it's got a massive library. Quite a few duds on there, but tons of bangers too. I had to put on one of my favorite multiplayer games, Blades of Steel. This game is nothing more than a super simple hockey game. One button to pass, one to shoot, no complex rules, just pure mindless hockey fun. Dig Dug is another chance to show them a very famous, important older game, and lots of people say that the NES port is one of the best ways to play it, so it's a perfect fit to put it in this list. DuckTales looks cute and cartoony, but that's deceptive. It's kinda tricky. It's not an easy game. However, it's not like impossibly difficult, and you can pick which level you want, so at the very least you're not stuck failing on the same level 1 over and over. I think that including some puzzle games on these lists is important, just for variety, and also, you don't know if your kiddo is some hidden Dr. Mario genius prodigy, so you kinda owe it to the world to make sure they get a chance to play it. In Paperboy, you're just a kid on a bike, riding along doing his paper route. You need to ration your papers and pay attention to which houses are your customers. It's hard, but not crazy. I think most kids will get the hang of this and have some good fun. The Game Boy. Here's how this is gonna go down. You'll show the kiddos this, and they'll immediately think it looks all black and white and old and stupid, but then you're gonna explain to the kiddo that this was the first portable gaming console that most kids played back in the 80s, basically like an early version of the Nintendo Switch. That'll give them a little bit of buy-in to try it out, and hopefully the games will catch their attention after that. Starting with the most important game on the Game Boy, and maybe the most important game ever. Tetris. Everyone knows about Tetris. I don't need to tell you about Tetris, other than to say that I guarantee that any kid will almost immediately grasp the game and get sucked in. Wario Land is a great one because lots of kids today know Wario. This was his first game. It looks great with big highly detailed sprites, and it's also pretty easy as early platformers go. Speaking of easy and characters that your kiddos might know, Kirby's Dream Land 2. This one is an all-time classic. The first Kirby game is also good, but Dream Land 2 is by far the better game. Going with a bit of a more long and involved adventure game, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, I think, is an amazing entry to the series. The limitations of the Game Boy gave us a kinda slower paced, easier to navigate and understand take on the Zelda formula. And finally, an arcade port, Alleyway. This one's just a super simple, no-nonsense arcade game. You have a paddle, you bounce the ball, you break the bricks. Perfect for any kiddo, or non-kiddo. Moving right along to the 16-bit era, we're finally at the Super Nintendo. This is where the games start looking really good, and the kinds of games that modern retro-style games seek to mimic. Donkey Kong Country is great because kids know Donkey Kong from Smash Bros. Or the Mario movie or Mario Kart or whatever, and this one is sort of 3D looking, so it feels a bit more modern. Also, Donkey Kong Country's a great series. Come on, obviously this had to be on the list. Let's do a racing game now, and an all-time classic retro racing game would have to be F-Zero. This one looks amazing, it's bright and colorful, great pixel art, and that Mode 7 faux 3D style actually holds up pretty well for this one in my opinion. Kids love dinosaurs, no arguing that. Jurassic Park has dinosaurs, no arguing that either, which means that kids will love this game. There's no way they wouldn't. This game is pretty long and hard if you're actually going to beat it, but kids don't need to feel that pressure. Just walk around and explore and don't get eaten. It doesn't need to be anything more than that. Turtles in Time is easily one of the best games for any kid, or any kid to play with another kid, or any kid to play with a grown-up, or for a grown-up to play with another grown-up actually. The Super Nintendo version is just as good as the arcade version, and you can even pre-enable the Infinite Life cheat for some stress-free turtle power. And finally, the reason that I haven't included a Mario game yet is because I was saving them for this, Super Mario All-Stars and Super Mario World. This is just about as good as it ever gets for retro gaming. There is no list of games for a kid that shouldn't include this game. It's like not even optional. The Sega Genesis is the system that lots of us aging gamers have nostalgia for, but I think if you explain to the kiddo that you're giving these games to about the rivalry of the Genesis versus the Super Nintendo, that'll be a fun bit of history. And then they could try them both and pick which one they think should come out on top. And if they pick the wrong one, not too late to put them up for adoption. Aladdin is just a fun game. It's got lovely pixel art and animation, fun to swing a sword around and jump on camels or whatever. Good old Disney games are always an easy choice. Dragon's Fury is the Genesis port of Devil's Crush Pinball. just without the devil stuff, so you don't have to worry that your kiddo will succumb to the darkness. Pinball is always good fun. Echoes the Tides of Time is probably the best Echo the Dolphin game, and kids love animals, so any game that lets you straight up be an animal will get a little bit of instant buy-in. King of Monsters 2. I mean, being a giant monster kaiju, stomping around a city, beating up other monsters and destroying the place, that's like a cheat code for a game that any kiddo would love. And of course, no Genesis list is complete without some Sonic. Super bright, colorful, fast, and classic games. I went with Sonic 2, because I'm a Tails guy, and this one is nice and accessible because it ramps up the difficulty slowly. The next handheld system was the Gameboy Colour. And for this, when you show the kiddo this game list, make sure that you show them photos or videos of the original Game Boy Color. Make sure they know how big a deal that having a color screen on a handheld game was back then. It was a huge step up from the original Game Boy. Also, these games look really good on modern displays. I have another Pokemon game later in the list, but the Pokemon trading card game is a very different game from the mainline Pokemon games. And kids today like Pokemon cards. There's a good chance that your kiddo has some. This is the game where they can actually play that card game. Game & Watch Gallery 2 is a good chance for them to learn about the Game & Watch games and play them alongside their updated remastered versions. Harry Potter is a character that kids today know, and the Game Boy Color Chamber of Secrets game is one of the best retro Harry Potter games. It's easy, it goes through the story that they probably know from the movie or the books, it looks good, it's Harry Potter. I think that Harvest Moon is a great change of pace for a kid to learn about this different style of game, a farming management sim. The third one of the Game Boy Color games is the one you want to go with here. Finally, we have Pocket Bomberman, another classic character that you can be the one to introduce them to, and the classic Bomberman gameplay style. And Pocket Bomberman looks great, it's fast and fun. This is probably my personal favorite Bomberman game that I've played. And here we go, onto the era of 3D games. You need to explain to your kiddo how big a deal it was to go from this to this in just a few years. And then as their mind is being blown, kick their butt at Smash Bros. Speaking of which, Smash Bros is an easy choice. This game is full of characters they probably know. It's super easy to pick up and instantly start smashing some faces. Great quick gameplay, great art and levels and fun looking action. This one has to be in any Nintendo 64 collection for a kiddo. 1080 Snowboarding, I guess is a racing game, but it's also just a fun snowboarding game. Virtual snowboarding will always be fun, and this game is nothing but really well done virtual snowboarding. Star Fox 64 is one of my personal favorite games on the system, and it is an easy choice to include on a list like this for a kiddo. It's simple, it's fun, it looks great, great characters, branching story, unique and interesting levels, flying spaceships, can't go wrong with that stuff. And then we have the first huge 3D platformer game like ever. Super Mario 64. This one is so good for kids because, well, it's Mario. Kids like Mario. It feels more like a modern Mario game because it's fully 3D. The levels are great, tons to do, tons to see, a mysterious castle to explore. It's a chunk of history and fun today. Finally, this is probably the most big and involved game on the list, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. This was a milestone for the Zelda franchise, and it has held up so well. The characters are cute, the world is fun to explore, it starts out in town so you can take a good long while to learn the controls, and the story is so dang good. If they stick with this, it could be a great gaming memory that they never forget. And of course, we have the bitter rivalry of the Nintendo 64 versus the original PlayStation. That's a fun bit of history to learn, but also the PS1 had so many good games. The N64 is usually known as the more kid-friendly console, but the sheer number of games on the PlayStation gave it just as many bangers for kids. Like Crash Bandicoot. This is a character that maybe kids would know, maybe not, but regardless, it's a great early platformer that's a bit more simple to navigate and control than the full 3D style open world platformers. Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped is the one that I'd go with. Ape Escape is so simple to grasp. Apes have escaped, you need to catch them. You have a net. One analog stick controls your character, the other one controls the net. It takes about 5 minutes to get the hang of, and then any kiddo will be an ape catching machine. This is one of my favorite multiplayer retro game series, and it is so good. Micro Machines V3. There's a ton of different types of vehicles, tiny cars and dune buggies and tanks driving around on real world tables and sandboxes or whatever. Another character that may or may not be known, good old Spyro the Dragon. Sony's main kid-friendly mascot for kid-friendly games. The first in the series is probably the best one because it starts so easy. It's charming. I love watching kids play this one. Ending with a racing game, I actually think that Wipeout 3 is an amazing game to give to a kiddo. It's a real racing game. Fast and tough, but it's all future-y. Big future cities and hovercrafts or whatever. It's not made for kids, but I bet most kids would have a pretty good time with this. And we're ending with the greatest handheld ever, the Game Boy Advance. This is the peak of retro gaming itself, in my opinion. You get pixel-based games that were made for the limitations of the hardware, but it's a later game system, so the devs by that point had figured out how to make truly amazing pixel-based games. So many of the Game Boy Advance games hold up beautifully. That's why it's my favorite retro system. I really wanted to get another Kirby game onto the list because Kirby is such a good character for kids. Just this adorable little squish ball that can turn into stuff. Obviously, kids love this little guy. Kirby and the Amazing Mirror is the one you want to go with on the Game Boy Advance. Mario Kart Super Circuit is Mario Kart, like the good old Super Nintendo Faux 3D Mode 7 Mario Kart, but this one is a lot more approachable than the Super Nintendo version. It looks better maps, more characters. It feels super retro, but not in a janky way. Maybe your kiddo knows about Dragon Ball Z, but even if they don't, Dragon Ball Z: The Legacy of Goku 2 is just a good game. It's a colorful little top-down action RPG where you fly around, throw energy blasts. It looks bright and cartoony, feels smooth, super retro but not frustrating. Hamtaro, Ham Heartbreak is freaking adorable. This game isn't about fighting, it's about friendship. You are a squishy little hamster, learning how to talk and act like a hamster, making your hamster friends like each other again. It's wholesome as heck. And of course, here it is, the grand finale. The one Pokemon game that we're going with, Pokemon Leaf Green. It is a classic Pokemon, a remake of the original Pokemon Blue, but polished up on the Game Boy Advance with bright colors, cleaner menus, smoother battles. You explore Kanto, catch monsters, battle gyms, and slowly build your dream team. Kids today know Pokemon, and this is the perfect way for them to play a retro Pokemon game, to learn about the origins of the series, but in a slightly more spruced up, modern kind of way. And that's it. The prophecy has been fulfilled. I promised you I'd make a video about my top 50 games for kids if you asked me nicely, and you did, so I did. But make sure you watch my video that inspired this one, linked below, because there's a lot more to think about when getting kids into retro games than just shoving games in their face. You gotta make it fun. You gotta give them a device to play them on, some extra challenges, all sorts of stuff to make sure they have a good time and don't nope right the heck out and go back to Roblox. But now I want to hear from you. What games would be on your list? Heck, if you're feeling ambitious or just bored, give me your list of your top 50 retro games for kids. I'd love to hear your ideas, so I can steal them if they're better than mine. Anyways, that's it from me for now. I gotta scoot. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.